that we all come from the same source. God is as much with us now as He will ever be. Good morning again, everyone. Once again, happy Father's Day to all fathers and father figures out there. But also, happy International Day of Yoga. It's the 9th International Day of Yoga. It's coming up on Tuesday. And it's useful to ask what is the purpose of these yogic techniques, or indeed of any, why was religion invented in the first place? Somebody took a lot of trouble. We know why it's perpetuated, because of all kinds of wrong reasons, but why was it invented? And you can answer that at multiple levels. You can say that there is the innate curiosity of man to find something greater than himself. And that's a great answer. You can also say, well, the soul remembers God, and somebody decided to do something about that memory. That's also true. But at a more practical level, Paramahansa Yogananda, whose teachings we follow here, he said something very interesting. That every action that anybody does, whether it's the unselfish actions of a saint or day-to-day actions that we do, get up and go to a job or cook dinner, wash dishes, raise a family, get angry with people, love people, or even the most evil act of murder and mayhem, all of those are motivated by exactly two drives within us. And those are to acquire happiness, is how he put it, that we want to be happy, and to get rid of suffering. I don't want to suffer anymore. I want to be happy. I don't want to suffer anymore. Anything that anybody does eventually in their minds can be traced back to these two drives. Now, before I go ahead, I want to pause and just point out that itself is a startling proof that we all come from the same source, is it not? It's that all of us have the exact same drive, not for some of our actions, but for every single action. So if that is not proof that we are one and we come from the same source, I don't know what is. But nonetheless, yet there exists a great deal of diversity in opinions, in everything. Each one of us is different. The reason for that diversity is because what each of us think makes us happy. You see, that's what's different. What we attach our happiness to is different for you, it's different for me. Some people think I am happy when I am with my family. Others say that I am happy when I am doing my job and being relevant, and when I'm protecting the environment, when I'm being recognized, when I'm loved, when I read books, when I'm with nature. Whatever that might be, my definition of happiness doesn't have to, that's also the key, resonate with your definition of happiness. But eventually, over a trajectory that lasts many lifetimes, we begin to realize that these outward pursuits, seeking happiness in all of these, what I mean by outward pursuits, well, you all know what I mean, but I just feel like I need to say a little more about it, so I will. These outward pursuits is attaching something outside of myself as the reason for my happiness. That's what it means, and therefore we pursue that. The same thing applies to suffering as well, but I don't want to kind of say both sides each time. It makes it very onerous. So these outward pursuits, eventually, after many lifetimes, we get the sense that, oh, maybe this doesn't work. Maybe, just maybe, there is a possibility that I have been mistaken for the last 5 million lifetimes. Okay, it has ended as this beautiful chant. It said, all the sense lamps that I did light have sooted into worries. So then we come on the spiritual path. And it's not a all or nothing thing, it's a gradual thing, but let's just say we come on the spiritual path. Now things get interesting. Because it's natural whenever we start a new endeavor, especially the spiritual path, where we say, this is the answer to all questions I ever had, then it's natural to ask, what do I need to get on the spiritual path? How long does it take? Are we there yet? What about all these bad things that I have done, which I know in the privacy of my mind are absolutely atrocious? Is somebody looking and going to judge me for it? These things are fairly natural to ask. And the answers, as perhaps many of you, and certainly I realized when I came on the path, the answers are slightly suspicious and not very satisfactory. Okay? So for Lahiri Mahashai, he used to say, Lahiri Mahashai is this gentleman here over on the left. He is Yogananda's guru's guru. He used to say, Bonat, Bonat, Bon Joy. And what that means is, this was in answer to question, are we there yet? He said, doing, and it's done. Now, imagine if you went to a university and said, how long does it take for me to get a degree? And they say, doing, and then it's done. That would be completely unacceptable, wouldn't it? Worldly pursuits are bound by time. In the following sense, it's very deep. So let me flesh that out a little bit. Say, let's take the example of the university. You're getting a 4-year degree, and right there it says it's 4 years. If you're very brilliant, you can maybe do it in 3 or something like that, but in general it's 4 or 5 years. You have a set of prerequisites, and you need to get those, and not you have to take assessments, and somebody should say you did good. Not just that. In this, you can always say, oh, I'm doing worse than you are. You're doing better than I am. I'm doing better than you. And those kind of relativities, hierarchies exist. And there is always one winner. There's always one valedictorian, one CEO, one top dog. And all the rest, by definition, are below. So these hierarchies, relativities, time-boundedness, they exist in worldly pursuits. Why? Here's why. It's because it's a path of acquisition. That I didn't have this knowledge, I need to acquire it. Or I didn't have this money. If I acquire so much, then I get to label myself as a millionaire. If I have this much money and this much credit, these are all quantified, measured, then I can buy a house, and so on. Okay? The spiritual path is entirely different. There was an article I was reading about Michelangelo, the great Renaissance sculptor and painter. And he, of course, carved the statue of David out of a 20-foot block of Carrara marble. It took him 3 years to do that. And about 4 years later, he painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel with these extraordinarily detailed frescoes, a tour de force of painting, if there ever was one. This, of course, is common knowledge, but this next thing I didn't know. So he was paid for this, and when you get paid for something, you have to sign a receipt saying, I received this payment, so that you can't go back and say, hey, nobody paid me. So he signed the receipt, Michelangelo. And you know what he signed it as? He said, Michelangelo Buonarroti, sculptor. After painting the Sistine Chapel, he signed his name as a sculptor. And you know why? It's because apparently for most of his life, Michelangelo held painting in low esteem, although he was one of the greatest painters ever. Yeah, isn't that interesting? And they asked him why, and here's what he said. I want to get this right. Of course, the quote is exactly on the fold here on my notes. So he said, the sculpture is already complete within the marble block before I start my work. It is already there. I just have to chisel away the superfluous material. The painting, on the other hand, he said, I start from a blank canvas and I add layer upon layer on it and create until I create something where none existed. Whereas for sculpture, and this was beautiful, he says, I saw the angel in the marble and I carved until I set him free. So because of this path of acquisition, which was the painting, seemed lower for him than sculpture, which was revealing something that was already perfect. Isn't that beautiful? Michelangelo Buonarroti, sculptor, after painting the Sistine Chapel, they were tuned into these Renaissance artists or any great artists. They are tuned into something big, and you have to go a little bit deep to see what it is. So the spiritual path, of course, as you've guessed by now, is more like a sculpture than a painting. That we already possess the joy that we seek. The impurities of the heart have to be chiseled away until that angel is set free. It goes a little more than that, and it all comes back to the issue of time and are we there yet kind of questions. Swami Kriyananda said that even our ability to feel joy in anything, like I go have good food and I feel joyful, I listen to a good piece of music, I'm blissed out. He said our ability to feel that joy is only because my nature is joy. If it wasn't, I wouldn't feel that joy. It's not manufactured. It's not that there is a ray of joy that comes from that piece of music or painting and puts it in my heart where no joy existed. In fact, it's the opposite. The ray of joy, the burst of joy goes out from my heart and identifies it with the painting. That's the main difference, sculpture versus painting. So again, an example that Swami Kriyananda gave on this was it's like sunshine shining on the side of a building. A few windows are open, the screens are open, and they receive the sunshine. The others are closed, so they don't receive the sunshine, but the sunshine is always there. God is as much with us now as he will ever be. So that's why it's not before and after. It's that if you started a university program, then you are not as much a Bachelor of Science today as you will ever be. That's absolutely not true. 4 years later, you're more of a Bachelor of Science than you were today, whereas the spiritual path doesn't work that way. Okay? So what this says, this has some wide-ranging implications here. Okay, this particular part. The first one is that there is no need to wait and accumulate enough good deeds before you can start reaping heavenly rewards. That this thing of, I am the greatest of sinners, well, we won't think I'm the greatest of sinners. There are a bunch of people much greater, but I've sinned so bad. And let me just build my bank account of goodwill and good deeds secretly, and then I'll go in the presence of God and say, now please give me this Bachelor of Enlightenment kind of degree. So the implication here is the sunlight is always shining. Okay, and this is the heart of Jesus Christ's saying today, say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh the harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. this is fine. It's a very uplifting message. Then the question is, how do you open those curtains and let the sunlight shine? Now this is about inner transformation. There's an episode, there's an incident in the life of Swami Kriyananda, which he wrote in his book, The Path. He was 21 years old at the time, and he had decided, 21 years old, he decided that he would find truth without God. And the reason he came to this monumental conclusion was that the version of God he was listening to in church was completely uninspiring for him. So he said, the truth is out there, okay? And I'm going to find it. And so he decided to seek it in astronomy. He says, let me look at the grandeur of heavens out there, all those galaxies, and maybe that will excite my happiness. And then political science, some perfect system of society, art and music and so on. But he said they all came to a dead end. So one day, he was at the Dockside Theater in Charleston, South Carolina. He went out on a walk, and he said, this has all come to a dead end. So if there is indeed a God, then what is he like? Surely he cannot be this judge who's waiting for me to commit a mistake so he can slap me in prison, eternal prison. That doesn't make sense at all. And he thought about it, and then he said, he had this moment of epiphany. He said, what is making me think these thoughts? That it's coming from somewhere. It doesn't let go of me. And he said, it's my consciousness. If that's the one that's beyond everything that I'm seeking, then that consciousness must be God. And it is my duty to attune my consciousness to that universal consciousness. So he had this moment of epiphany. And then he came back, and he said, my friends were there having a cup of coffee, and they said, oh, look at this Don. His name, Donald Walters was his name. Look at Don, he's always so serious. And Kriyananda said, I looked at them like they were yapping dogs. Now, nothing changed outside, but he was transformed inside. You see, the act of opening the screen is frequently this inner transformation, which can happen in just a moment. There is neither preparation nor prerequisites needed to find God. It could happen at any time, kind of. And that kind of is where our awareness is, where our consciousness is. The transformation Swami Kriyananda talks about is that his own awareness went from the outside, meaning lower down his spine, to higher up. His awareness means the whole total of all your thoughts and feelings and so on. Where is that centered in? Is it centered in the infinity, or is it centered in my day-to-day? Oh, this didn't happen, this transaction didn't happen, what am I going to get out of it? Am I going to get punished? If the awareness shifts from lower to higher awareness, then that's when, are we there yet? That's the answer to that question is, well, you could be. Where is your awareness right now? You see what I'm saying? So that's the second part of Jesus's quote, lift up your eyes and look on the fields. Now, if you think about this, Jesus is going with people, and who would say, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, because the fields are not hanging from down there, not the hanging gardens of Babylon. They are just fields somewhere in Galilee, one would assume. This lift up your eyes is clearly a more of a practical, it is metaphorical, but also eminently practical. There is, if I lower my eyes and focus on my toenail or on my kneecap, nothing profound is going to happen. Okay, you might realize I need to cut my toenails, or oh, my knee's hurting a little bit. There is nothing inherently profound about focusing on that. But there is something inherently profound about focusing right here. So if I want to be highly esoteric, give me the permission to be highly esoteric just for a moment, because it's really fun. Sri Yukteswar, who was Yogananda's guru, He wrote a book called Kaivalya Darshanam, which translated into English means the holy science. And in that book, he has these sutras, and in the third one, he is describing the process of creation. And he says that God, the eternal consciousness, whose nature was bliss, at this unmoving sense of awareness which is experienced as ever existing, ever new bliss. This consciousness had the desireless desire to enjoy that bliss through multiple outlets. And so it set a small portion of that consciousness into vibration. There was no vibration, and it set a small portion of that into vibration. And now these are Sri Yukteswar's words. So he says, this vibration, which is the sound of Om, presented the idea of change, which is time, in the ever unchangeable. The idea of division, space, in the ever indivisible. Just ponder that for a moment, at this eternal consciousness of bliss, which was ever new, but the notion of change didn't exist. So it said that into the idea of eternity came before and after, and into the idea of infinity came here and there. You see what I'm saying? Now, and this, because of this, individual pieces of consciousness separated themselves out. And that those little blobs of individual consciousness is us, but in it, in every atom of creation, was embedded a piece of this eternal consciousness. Now here is the connection that in the body, where we sense that unchanging, undivided, not subject to measurement or hierarchies, and therefore not about before regrets of the past or worries about the future, that place is not in your toenail, it's not in your upper lip or cheekbones, but it happens to be here. It's a thing that the more we center our attention, the more we get lifted out, that curtain lifts just a little bit, and a little bit of sunshine comes in. So all of the spiritual practices is a way for us to help keep that lift right here. So Yogananda used to say that even in daily life, as much as possible, stay here. And it's a literal thing. It's not a metaphorical thing. Every now and then, if you have a busy life and you're responsible for many things, well, you could put out more energy, and you should, but then you will get just as much if every now and then you came back and stayed here. And why do we serve others? Why do we practice kindness? Why do we put other people first? You know why? Well, it's good for them. That's what God told us to do. But also, the simple reason is it helps us stay here more. That's the connection. That's the chipping away that we need to do to set the angel free. Or practices like meditation, working with the breath, working with the energy. Why do we do that? Because it helps us stay here. Because here is neither before nor after. It is, as Swami Kriyananda put it, there is nothing in all of eternity except right here, right now.